All right, I want to show you guys the exact moment that Joe Rogan realizes Donald Trump has lost his damn mind. Rogan even laughs in Trump's face at a few points when he tries to push him on his 2020 election fraud lies, but Trump isn't able to substantiate it in any way. See, Trump made a 3-hour-long appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast with 10 days left until the election in an attempt to win over low-propensity bro voters and in an attempt to humanize himself. I mean, look, he didn't wear his usual red tie. He's wearing a yellow tie with combed hair. He tried to appear much more likable and much more affable, but that doesn't work. It's overshadowed when you continue to push this massive, widespread lie, and when Joe Rogan, of all people, is able to fact check you and say, hey man, are you ever going to present any of this evidence to the public? And that rattles Trump. That question in and of itself leaves Trump stuttering. He's like, oh, someday the evidence will come out. You know, with 10 days to go, we have no time to waste. Make sure you drop a like, make sure you subscribe. And before we jump into the 2020 election fraud segment, let's lay the groundwork, because I do want to read the transcripts of the 2020 election fraud part as well. The transcript of this podcast really shows how mind-blown Rogan was and how incomprehensible Donald Trump was during this podcast. So let's jump in with this first clip of Donald Trump being asked about his first day in office. What was that like? But he doesn't quite understand the question. Then he immediately pivots to the shooting within 2 seconds. Just listen to how much of a mess this is.
When you're running for president, you don't really know what it's going to be like when you actually get into office. What did you think it was going to be like?
In office or when I decided to run?
So no, when you got in.
When I was in. So when I was in and won and was in the White House, essentially.
Yes.
He just had to clarify the question like twice. He's like, so you mean when I'm in? And he's like, yeah, when you're in the White House. Oh, so when I'm inside the White House? Like,
well, first of all, it was very surreal.
I would imagine.
It's very interesting. When I got shot, it wasn't surreal. That should have been surreal. When I was laying on the ground, I knew exactly what was going on. I knew exactly where I was hit. They were saying you were hit all over the place because there was so much blood from the ear. You would know that better than anyone. When they get the ear torn up,
ears bleed a lot.
They bleed. And
Joe Rogan's like, ears bleed a lot, but answer the damn question, man. Let's see if he goes on to answer the question.
Anyway, so and I was thinking the other day, when that happened, I really knew where I was. I knew exactly what happened. I said I wasn't hit anywhere else. With the presidency, it was a very surreal experience. Okay,
like, what's day one like?
So,
you win,
yeah.
You get inaugurated. Holy shit, I'm the president.
I'm pretty sure Trump continues to talk about the shooting after that question, but in this next clip, Trump talks about Lincoln and says that Lincoln was depressed because he lost his son, Tad. But let me play this and tell me if you know what's wrong.
All of a sudden, I'm standing in the White House. And it was very, very surreal. That room was so beautiful to me, much more beautiful than it actually is. You know, to me, when I looked at the bed, and the bed you could see was a little bit longer, had to be a little bit longer. He lost his son, and they suffered, the two of them suffered from melancholia. They didn't call it depression. They called it melancholia, and they suffered from it. He was a very depressed guy, and she was a very depressed woman, more so than him. And on top of that, they lost their son, whose name was Ted. And it was just seeing it in the little pictures, a little tiny picture. I mean, you can't see the details there. Little tiny, everything the way it was, a little tiny picture of Tad, who he lost. And it was devastating.
America's greatest historian apparently doesn't realize that Tad died 6 years after Lincoln died. So there is no way that Lincoln was, quote, melancholy in the way that he implies. Here's a clip of Donald Trump still talking about Lincoln.
Having a hard time because he couldn't beat Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee won like 13 battles in a row. And he was getting like a phobia, like a fighter. You know, a lot about the fight stuff. But like, I went to a UFC fight, and it was a champion who was 14-1 about a year ago. You would know the names. 14-1. And the only guy he lost to was this one guy. But the guy that he was fighting was like almost just an average fighter. He lost numerous times, but he beat this one guy. So I said, okay.
I really don't know who you're talking about.
Joe Rogan here represents literally the average voter at all times, because honestly, it's a never meet your heroes moment. I know that Joe Rogan looks up to Trump. He was absolutely kissing Trump's ass throughout this interview, but there are a few moments where he's literally like, all right, let's get you back to bed, old man. I don't know what you were rambling about. I don't know what you're yapping about. Again, there's a moment where Joe Rogan goes, man, you're weaving way too hard right now. You got to bring the weave way back in here. So that's him trying to respectfully say, please stop going off topic, sir. Here's Trump continuing continuing to claim the 2020 election was stolen. And let's jump into the 2020 election section because it's a few minutes long and it's some good stuff.
Because he wanted attention.
He was stupid.
So I want to talk about 2020 because you said over and over again that you were robbed in 2020.
Yeah, totally.
How do you think you were robbed? Everybody always cuts you off. I'm going to allow.
Well, they not only cut you off. Well, what I'd rather do is we'll do it another time, and I would bring in papers that you would not believe. So many different papers.
You wouldn't believe.
That election was so crooked. It was the most crooked election.
Okay, but give me some examples of how.
Well, let's start on the top and the easy ones.
Okay.
They were supposed to get legislative approval to do the things they did, and they didn't get it. In many cases, they didn't get it.
What things?
Anything.
Legislative approval
like for extensions of the voting, for voting earlier, for this,
Right.
for all different things. By law, they had to get legislative approvals. You don't have to go any further than that. If you take a look at Wisconsin, they virtually admitted that the election was rigged, robbed, and stolen. They wouldn't give access in certain areas to the ballots because the ballots weren't signed. They weren't originals. We could go into this stuff. We could go into the ballots, or we could go into the overall. I'll give you another one.
Are you going to present this ever? Do you think like?
Let me just give you one more before.
Are you going to present this ever? And Trump goes, I don't know. And honestly, what I was thinking while watching this is maybe Joe Rogan's style of soft pushback is what Trump has needed. And just hear me out for 1 second. Whenever a hardcore journalist goes after him, Trump shuts down and turns into a bully. But you really see how much of an idiot he is when Joe Rogan is just poking and prodding, asking, are you ever going to release the evidence? What hearings are you talking about? What files are you talking about? Just simple questions shows that Trump has no clue what he's talking about. Of course, journalists should still press him. But my point is, every time he goes on one of these bro podcasts, these conversations expose a lot more about him than some of the press releases he does.
51 intelligence agents come up that the laptop was from Russia. It turned out to be totally false.
Okay, so he just pivoted to the laptop, and the laptop is a completely separate claim from the claims of massive, widespread voter fraud that Trump alleged happened in the 2020 election, and that Trump brought 60 court cases trying to figure out.
51 former intelligence agents, right?
They say that made, I don't believe it's this much, but it doesn't have to. I lost by I didn't lose, but
he admitted to losing right there. He did it again, watch.
Doesn't have to. I lost by I didn't lose, but they say I lost, Joe. They say I lost by 22,000.
Joe Rogan laughs and Trump tries to get him to stop, almost like dude, if they were in North Korea, Joe Rogan wouldn't have been able to laugh at that right there. Trump's mistake.
I don't believe it's this much, but it doesn't have to. I lost by I didn't lose, but
dude, you can see the moment he realizes he messed up. Look at Trump's eyes kind of widen for 1 second.
But it doesn't have to. I lost by I didn't lose, but they say I lost, Joe. They say I lost by 22,000 votes. That's like 1/10 of 1%, less than that. It's a tiny little thing. 22,000 votes spread over this period. So 51 intelligence agents lied. They lied. They knew it was. It was Hunter's. It was from his bed.
Everybody is lying except for Donald Trump. Every single court, every single institution, the FBI, the DOJ, Mike Pence, Bill Barr, they're all lying. Trump is the one telling the truth. Every single independent organization or every single country that's our ally across the globe, they're all lying. You can only trust Donald Trump and maybe Rudy Giuliani. But let me read the transcript of this really quickly. And then I want to show you some more clips because this shows how cooked Trump is. So Trump says, quote, that election was so crooked. It was the most crooked election. Rogan says, okay, but give me some examples of how. And again, none of this is me defending Joe Rogan. He is a conspiracy theorist who needs to stop. But I do think that this type of question is pretty decent. You ask it in a casual way. Okay, just give me some examples. And Trump says, well, let's start. Let's start at the top and the easy ones. They were supposed to get legislative approval to do the things they did, and they didn't get it in many cases. They didn't get it. And then Rogan asks another simple question. What things? Trump just says anything. Rogan says legislative approval of, and Trump says, like for extensions of the voting, for voting earlier, all these different things by law. It says all this different things by law. They had to get legislative approvals. You don't have to go any further than that. If you take a look at Wisconsin, they virtually admitted that the election was rigged, robbed, and stolen. They didn't do that at all. They weren't original ballots. We could go into this stuff. We can go into the ballots, or we can go into the overall. I'll give you another way. And then Rogan says, are you ever going to present this ever? Trump goes, Rogan goes, do you think like, and then Trump goes, let me give you one more. 51 intelligence agents came up and said the laptop. And that's where we just left off. But Swan Marcus over here points out, Joe Rogan slowly seeming to realize that Trump is totally insane is an incredible read. Trump is such a cracked out conspiracy theorist that Joe Rogan thinks his claims are lacking insufficient evidence. That's the overarching picture here that I haven't touched on yet. Joe Rogan, of all people, this bro who gets sucked up into every single conspiracy theory. I mean, I could convince this dude the sun was real if you just gave me 10 minutes in a room with him. I could convince him of anything, honestly. Joe Rogan is the one pushing back on Donald Trump, and he's able to make the house of cards that is the election fraud lie crumble with just one single poke. It's actually insane how weak the election fraud argument is. Here's Trump again talking about the enemy from within.
You're not going to have a problem. And I say it to people. We have a bigger problem, in my opinion, with the enemy from within. And it drives them crazy when I use that term. But we have an enemy from within. We have people that are really bad people that I really think want to make this country unsuccessful. When you look at what's happening at our border, Joe, when you have people coming in that when other countries are allowed to empty their prisons into our country.
Nobody's emptying their prisons. And when he calls Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff very bad people because they supposedly don't want to protect our border, he's conveniently leaving out the fact that he's the one who instructed Congress to shoot down Senator Lankford's bill that was endorsed by Border Patrol agents that would have increased funding for Border Patrol and asylum judges.
With murderers. We had 13,099 murderers dropped in our country over the last 3 years.
Not true. Dropped in our country? Like airdropped? Did they jump out of a plane?
And 15,000 rapists convicted.
Rapists?
And here's Joe Rogan adding on to it, yeah.
And 15,000 rapists convicted.
I do want to point out these numbers are completely false. These are numbers that ICE released. And then, after Republicans misconstrued them over and over, the director of ICE had to come out and say, you guys are looking at numbers from the past 4 or 5 administrations. I think it was 40 years. You guys are looking at 40 years worth of numbers, and you guys are trying to place it in a 4-year time slot.
Rapists?
Yeah.
Drug dealers, drug lords.
And that's just the ones that have been accounted for.
Correct. People from mental institutions.
What do you think the strategy is?
Hundreds of thousands of major criminals, tougher and worse than anybody we have. You're not going to have a problem.
And there's Joe Rogan just feeding into his theory. And honestly, I think that's part of the argument why Kamala Harris should have done this interview. A lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But this would have been her chance to get the most eyes until Election Day. I don't know if there's another event that could have been this big. And Joe Rogan doesn't push back. Joe Rogan doesn't have the mental ability to push back on Kamala's housing plan. You think Joe Rogan's going to be able to push back harder than Bret Baier? Kamala Harris manhandled Bret Baier, or woman-handled, whatever you'd say. I don't know. Right here, Trump has a hypothetical about Afghanistan and the withdrawal. It's insane.
I had a big rally and I saw a child in the front row about a year and a half ago, and I called the child up. I said, do you mind if I borrow your child? Oh, yes, please. And they came up, kids 5 years. I gave them quick details, you know. I said, we want to get out of this place, and we have this, and we have this, and we have the equipment. I gave them a little thing. I said, do you take your soldiers out first or last after everything's done? You take them out last, sir. A child would know that. We took our soldiers out first.
What?
This is Trump confirming he has a 5-year-old's understanding of both foreign policy, domestic policy, and the world around him. I've said this so many times, but the idea of building a wall on the border to fix a decades-long problem is infantile. It's something my little cousin would come up with. It's like, yeah, we have this problem that people have been trying to solve since Reagan. Why don't we just build a big wall with Legos or whatever? And Trump just said he pulls 5-year-olds up on stage and asks them questions about the Afghanistan withdrawal that he set the timetable of with the Doha Accords. Here's Donald Trump completely BSing about U.S. oil and drilling.
Dangerous.
But actually, We have evil people in our country.
Yes.
If you have a smart president, he can deal with Russia. He can deal with all of it. Russia would have never gone into Ukraine if I were president.
That's not true, but here's Donald Trump again saying that Democrats are the enemy from within, but he said that Russia and that Xi Jinping are the so-called enemy, time and time again. They're just a so-called enemy. They are maybe the enemy. And that's this weird flirting with authoritarianism that he does, where he will push away Trudeau and Angela Merkel, our more liberal allies. Well, Angela Merkel's not in office anymore, but he would push them away when he was in office. Meanwhile, he would take secret phone calls with Vladimir Putin. He would say that he writes love letters to Xi Jinping. He would meet with Kim Jong-un and legitimize him on the world stage. So going back to this clip where Donald Trump says the enemy is from within, I played it like 1 or 2 minutes ago. This is the type of divisive apocalyptic rhetoric that Republicans accuse Democrats of using, and that's the most annoying part. I have friends who gaslight me into saying that because President Biden called Trump a loser one time, that rises to the same level as Donald Trump saying Democrats are the enemy from within, we might need to mobilize the National Guard, all this insane stuff. Even the election fraud lie is so inherently divisive. You're dividing the country into an alternate reality.
How would you have stopped it?
Automatic, 2 things. I told him. I said, Vladimir, you're not going in. I used to talk to him all the time.
So if you could have prevented it and you said, Vladimir, you're not going in, how come you didn't prevent it?
I used to talk.
Also, the way he says that is weird.
I said, Vladimir, you're not going in. I used to talk to him all the time. You're not going in. I can't tell you what I told him because I think it would be inappropriate.
Y'all, I can make a whole second video about this. Just in the past 2 minutes, Trump has admitted that he talks to Putin a lot behind the scenes. He admitted that he asked Putin not to go in, and Putin still did. I can make an entire documentary about this interview.
But someday he'll tell you, but he would have never gone in. But you know why else he wouldn't have gone in? Oil prices at $40 a barrel wouldn't have allowed him, wouldn't have given him the money to prosecute that.
So one of the replies said, I don't think I've ever seen anyone who can ramble on as much as that orange loon. And I've seen many bullshit artists in my time. Well said, Lana. And the replies. Here's Trump and Rogan just talking about California.
Every time I go to California, I said, you have so much water. They don't know it. I'm telling you, people living in Beverly Hills, they turn off the water. Same thing with the electric. They want to go to all electric cars, but they have brownouts every weekend, you know.
Well, right after they made the announcement that as of 2035, you're not going to be able to buy an internal combustion engine in California,
Yeah.
like within a month, they had some announcement asking people to not charge their Teslas. Because the grid couldn't handle it. Well, how are you going to handle it?
I will terminate the mandate immediately. Just a
Good,
mandate.
thank you.
I take everything back. Joe Rogan is a disgusting sycophant that lets Donald Trump spew lies. I mean, I already believed that this entire time. I know that Joe Rogan is letting Trump on his platform to spew lies in front of millions of people, but I still stick with my point earlier that sometimes when Joe Rogan just lightfully pushes back on these questions, it's insane to see how easily the house of card tumbles. So, Trump says that California actually has so much water. They don't. Nobody says that. No, California does not have so much water. They said California knows they have water, but they're actually hiding it. That's not true. He said they have brownouts every week or weekly. That is not true at all. And then Trump says he'll veto a California law within his first 2 days in office. I don't think that's how it works. Here's Trump insisting that he's not playing golf.
Great guy.
But wasn't
He's
that like a couple of days after you got shot?
I don't know. I know I haven't.
That was one of the funniest things. You were on the golf course.
I think I did. Yeah, maybe I did. But I view it very interestingly. I'm running for president of the United States. To me, it's such a big deal. It's so important. So I've gone now.
It's the biggest deal in the free world.
It's 100 times bigger than the Super Bowl, and it's one person.
Yeah.
So you're down to 2 people, and we start off at 9 billion, because you have 9 billion, they say, in the world. Who knows what that number is? But you get down to 350 million. Sadly, we have no idea what we have in this country, but let's assume it's 325, 350. And you're down to 2 people. It's the biggest thing in the world. And when I heard she took off yesterday...
That was the most incoherent way of ever saying there are 350 million people in America, and it's narrowed down to 2 for president.
And she took off the day before, and she's going to take off tomorrow or the next day. I haven't taken a day off in 56 days. That's a long time. I haven't taken 1 day off.
Kamala didn't even take a day off. She did 2 interviews, but didn't do a rally for 1 day, and Trump is claiming that she was resting in bed, or that she went on vacation in the tropics. I don't know. Here's Trump talking about whales being driven crazy by wind energy. Just a few dudes chatting about conspiracy stuff, you know.
How about in New Jersey, off the coast of New Jersey, they want to build. The people are going crazy not to build them. But where you have them, the whales are washing up on shore.
Right.
So In 50 years, they had one whale come ashore. Now they had like 18 come in the last year.
What is happening with the whales? I've read about this.
Well, they say that the wind drives them crazy. It's a vibration because you have those,
Right.
those things are 50-story buildings, some of them.
Right, and they're
50.
super sensitive to vibrations.
They have
I hope you guys know there are people in America who trust these two men more than they trust their doctor, their therapist, their physician. That's a scary point that we're in, and I'll make more videos breaking this down throughout the day. Make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe. Thank you guys for being here. Peace out.